30 years is a long time to be married. It's long enough for the edges of passion to dull, for routines to become rituals, for silence to feel less like peace and more like distance. My name is Marianne Porter. I'm 58 years old. I've lived in the same house on the same street, beside the same man since I was 28. Tom is a good husband, steady, responsible, a man who builds things with his hands and only cries at war movies. We raised 2 daughters, paid off a mortgage, buried parents, and weathered every kind of storm without ever once talking about the weather between us. We still sleep in the same bed. But most nights we're back to back, drifting in opposite dreams. It's strange how loneliness can live inside something that looks like commitment. I wasn't looking for anything. Not really. But maybe. I'd started listening harder, noticing more. The way my reflection changed in certain lighting. The way no one had said I looked beautiful in a long, long time. And then came the high school reunion. I hadn't planned to go. But my friend Leslie insisted. Said I needed a night out. Something fun, something harmless. So I slipped into an old black dress, the one I used to wear on anniversaries before those dinners stopped meaning anything. I curled my hair, put on lipstick, and for the first time in years, I looked in the mirror and saw someone trying to be remembered. The venue was a community center ballroom. Cheap wine, bad lighting, and too many people pretending they hadn't aged. That's when I saw him. His name was Ethan Hayes. He was 2 years ahead of me in school, the boy everyone whispered about. He had that lazy grin, that leather jacket charm. Back then I never even spoke to him. He was the kind of boy girls like me watched, not touched. And now? He looked like time had shaped him carefully. Silver in his hair. Laugh lines around his eyes. Still that grin though, just a little quieter now. He saw me before I saw him. And when I did, he was already walking toward me. Marianne Porter, he said, like it was a name he'd said in dreams. I'm surprised you remember me, I replied, smiling before I could stop myself. He leaned in, eyes warm. I remember the way you used to look out the window during third period English. Like the world was too small for you. That sentence did something to me. Something I hadn't felt in years. Not butterflies. Not lust. Recognition. Someone had seen me. Not as a mother. Not as a wife. Not as a woman who'd traded lipstick for grocery lists. But as Marianne. We talked all night. Laughed like teenagers. Danced to music that used to play on cassette tapes. I don't know how many drinks I had. Enough to forget how long it had been since I last swayed with a man whose hand rested just below the small of my back. He didn't kiss me. Not that night. But when we said goodbye, he brushed a strand of hair behind my ear and whispered, "You haven't changed at all." And as I drove home, heels kicked off in the passenger seat, my heart beating too loud in the quiet car, I realized something I hadn't dared admit in decades. There was still a girl inside me, and she had just woken up. I didn't expect to hear from him again. Reunions are like little pockets of suspended time. Bubbles of memory and wine and flattery that pop the minute you go back to your real life. That's what I told myself anyway. But 3 days later I got a message. Still thinking about that dance. You made it feel like we were 17 again. I read it twice. Then again. Not because I didn't understand it, but because something in my chest stirred with a heat I didn't know how to name. Tom was in the garage sorting tools. The house smelled like leftover chili. The dog was snoring in the hallway. And yet I stood in the kitchen with my phone in hand, heart pounding like I was sneaking out the window instead of stirring stew. I waited 5 minutes, then typed back. You always did know how to say the exact wrong thing in exactly the right way. He replied immediately. Wrong thing. Making a married woman blush in her own kitchen. That should be a crime. A pause. Then, only if she regrets it. I didn't reply. Not then. But that night, after Tom had fallen asleep and the house was silent in that familiar, aching way, I picked up my phone again. We talked for an hour. About the past. About the kind of music we used to tape off the radio. About teachers we hated. About our parents. His divorce. My daughters. The books I stopped reading when life got too loud. There was something easy in the way he spoke. No performance. No small talk. Just seeing me. Asking questions. Listening without trying to fix or dismiss. Every word was like water on dry soil. The next night we talked again. And again the night after that. It became a rhythm. A soft, secret beat that played behind the life everyone still thought I was happily living. I told myself it was just friendship. That it wasn't. Cheating if there were no hands, no mouths, no moans. But I lied. Because the way I looked forward to his name lighting up my phone, the way I rehearsed responses in my head, picked the best lighting in the room when we switched to video, that wasn't innocent. That was desire with training wheels. And slowly, without meaning to, I stopped checking whether Tom noticed. Because deep down I knew he wouldn't. He hadn't really looked at me in years. Not that way. But Ethan did. Even through a screen. He looked at me like I was still made of things worth wanting. And every night, when I lay in bed with a body that felt both too old and too alive, I couldn't help but think, maybe some rules were written before I knew what it meant to want something just for me. Started with coffee. That's what I told myself. That it was harmless. Just two old classmates catching up after a few weeks of late-night messages and long silences between breaths. We agreed on a place outside the city, far enough that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew, close enough that I could still be home by noon. I told Tom I was running errands. Target, groceries, maybe stopping by the consignment shop. He barely looked up from his phone. Pick up more dog food. The cafe was tucked behind an art gallery, quiet, unassuming. Ethan was already there when I arrived. He stood up when he saw me, smiled like he'd been waiting since high school. I remember thinking he looked both older and younger than the man I danced with at the reunion. The silver in his hair caught the light. His eyes, they didn't skim over me. They landed. And I didn't look away. We sat in the corner sipping lattes. I couldn't tell you what we talked about, something about music, I think. Or travel. Or the absurdity of online dating after 50. All I remember is the way he listened. Like my every word deserved a seat at the table. At some point I laughed, really laughed, the kind that shakes your shoulders. And his hand brushed mine on the table. A light touch. Intentional. Barely a moment. But my pulse jumped. And I didn't move my hand away. Stayed there. Between us. Like a decision. Neither of us named it. Not out loud. But after that something changed. We walked together through the gallery next door. The place was empty. Just us, quiet walls and soft light over oil canvases. One painting stopped me cold. A girl standing in a field at dusk. Wind in her hair, mouth slightly parted. Like she was waiting for something to find her. Ethan stepped beside me. "She looks like you," he murmured. My voice caught. "I used to look like that." He turned to face me. "No," he said gently. "You still do. You just forgot." And before I could answer, before I could remind him that I was married, that I had dishes waiting in the sink and a husband who still expected dinner at 6, he reached out. His hand brushed my cheek. Fingertips soft, reverent. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just that touch. That first touch. And in that quiet museum hallway, surrounded by portraits of other lives, I let my eyes close. Not to pretend, but to remember. To remember what it felt like to want without guilt. To be wanted without apology. And when I opened them again, his hand was still there. Still gentle. Still waiting. I stepped back. Only an inch. But it was already too late. Because once you've been touched in a way that reminds your skin it's still alive, you don't go back untouched. I told myself it would never go further than that touch. That I'd return to my real life, wash the coffee scent from my sweater, and tuck the moment away like a pressed flower between the pages of a book I'd never read again. But then came his message 2 days later. Thursday. Room 214. "If you come, I'll know what it means." No pressure. No plea. Just an invitation. And a choice. I stared at the text for hours. Read it in the laundry room. In line at the pharmacy. While folding towels I didn't care about. I read it in bed, lying next to a man who didn't ask why I was quiet or why I turned away when he touched my hip in his sleep. Room 214. I said I had a meeting. At work. Then I said it was at the school board office. Then I stopped trying to make the lie perfect. Because deep down I knew I was going. The motel was off the highway, not seedy but not nice. The kind of place where time doesn't matter and people don't ask questions. The parking lot was nearly empty. I parked in the back. Wore sunglasses. My heart was louder than the gravel beneath my shoes. I knocked once. The door opened. He didn't say anything. just stepped aside and let me in. The room was quiet. Pale yellow walls. A small bed. A nightstand with a cheap clock. But it didn't feel empty. It felt like something was about to happen that would change me. "I didn't think you'd come," he said softly. "I didn't think I would either." We stood there for a long moment, both waiting. Both trembling in places neither of us showed. Then he walked toward me. Slow. Gentle. And kissed me. Not hungrily. Not wildly. But like I was a secret he'd been saving his whole life. His hands were careful, reverent, brushing over my arms, my back, my waist. Every inch of me was seen. Worshipped. Rediscovered. Clothes came off like petals. Each one a piece of armor I didn't realize I'd been wearing for decades. And when he finally touched me, really touched me, I cried. Not because I was guilty, but because I felt awake. Alive in ways I hadn't been since my wedding night, maybe not even then. My body didn't care that it was older now, softer in places, marked by motherhood and time. Because under Ethan's mouth, under his hands, I was 17 again. The girl who once dreamed of running, of kissing with the windows down, of being chosen by someone who saw her. And for 1 hour, in a quiet motel room where the bed creaked and the world paused, she came back to me. Breathless. Wild. Mine. Afterward, we lay tangled in silence. He traced my spine. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if the sky had changed. It hadn't. But I had. I didn't say, "I love you." He didn't ask me to leave my husband. It wasn't about forever. It was about remembering. And now that I'd remembered, I didn't know how I'd forget. I went home and made dinner. Spaghetti. Garlic bread. A salad I didn't eat. Tom sat across from me, slurping noodles, talking about something at the hardware store. A new drill or some neighbor's tree trimming. I nodded in all the right places. Smiled when he looked up. Washed the dishes with hands that still remembered Ethan's skin. And somehow he didn't notice a thing. That's what struck me most in the days that followed. Not the guilt. Not the fear. But the ease. The way I could return to this life. Pour coffee, fold laundry, kiss Tom on the cheek, while a secret bloomed inside me like a second heart. It scared me, because it meant I'd gotten too good at disappearing. Even from myself. I didn't tell anyone. Not Leslie. Not the girls. Not even my reflection when I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror late at night. But Ethan knew. We didn't meet again right away. We didn't need to. One message from him in the morning could undo my whole day. A voice memo at night. His voice, low and intimate, left me aching in places no one touched anymore. I found myself dressing differently. Softer blouses. A little more color on my lips. Perfume I hadn't worn since the early 2000s. I told Tom it was just refreshing my closet. He grunted, distracted by the evening news. And the strangest part? I wasn't trying to leave him. I wasn't trying to ruin what we'd built. The house, the kids, the quiet years of shared survival. But I had changed. The woman who stood at the sink each morning humming to herself. She wasn't sleepwalking anymore. She was aware of her body, her needs, her wants. And that awareness made everything louder. The quiet between Tom and me. The absence of touch. The way he hadn't asked me how I felt in years. Ethan did. He asked me what I dreamed of. What scared me. What books I once loved before I traded pages for bills and carpool lines. He didn't offer to fix me. He simply noticed. And that noticing, it made me greedy. Not just for him, but for myself. For the girl I'd buried beneath casseroles and compromise. For the woman I thought I'd never get to be. I was still married. Still a mother. Still responsible. But now, I was also someone else. Someone with a secret. And I couldn't tell anymore if it was the secret that kept me breathing. Or the woman I'd become because of it. It happened on a Wednesday. Nothing special. Nothing dramatic. Just another motel room. Another afternoon carved out between lies and longing. He opened the door for me like always. That soft, knowing smile. That heat in his eyes that told me my age didn't matter. Only the way I breathed when he touched me. We didn't waste time talking. Clothes came off in seconds now. The ache was too familiar. The need too sharp. He made love to me like it was the last time. But it wasn't the sex that undid me. It was the moment after, when I was curled against him, my cheek resting on his chest, and he brushed his fingers through my hair like I was something precious. And whispered, You feel like mine. I froze. Not visibly, but inside something cracked. Not out of fear, but out of knowing. Because I did. I felt like his. And in that moment I wanted to be. Desperately. Not just in that bed. Not just in that hour. But in the world outside, the one I returned to each night like a ghost slipping back into someone else's body. I didn't respond. He didn't press. But something had shifted in the silence. Later, as I stood in front of the motel mirror brushing my hair, I caught a glimpse of myself. Flushed, disheveled, glowing. And I realized I hadn't looked this alive in decades. Not on anniversaries. Not at graduations. Not even on the day I married Tom. Ethan came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist. He kissed my shoulder and whispered, "I want more." And that word more wrapped itself around my ribs like a vice. Because I knew what it meant. Not just more time. Not just more hours in hidden rooms. But more of me. He wanted what I wasn't sure I could give. What I wasn't sure I could keep. Because back home was a husband who still believed we were surviving. Back home were daughters who still saw me as steady. Good. Whole. I couldn't tell them that I had split in two. That one part of me was still setting the table, while the other was learning how to breathe again in stolen daylight. I left the motel quietly that day. No promises. No answer. Just the echo of his voice in my ear. You feel like mine. And the truth I wasn't ready to say back. That he felt like mine too. Our 30th anniversary came and went with barely a flicker. No dinner plans. No flowers. Not even a card from Tom. Just a mumbled "Happy anniversary, babe," as he passed me in the hallway holding a box of garage tools. I stood at the sink later that morning, my hands in soapy water, staring at the window, wondering how we had arrived here, together but so painfully separate. I didn't remind him that 10 years ago he took me to a vineyard, or that 15 years ago he left roses in the fridge so they'd be fresh when I woke up, because I wasn't sure he remembered any of it. Because part of me no longer wanted him to. That night we went out to dinner. At his suggestion. A place nearby. Not romantic, just convenient. The kind with laminate menus and tired waitresses who've seen too many wedding rings worn like handcuffs. I wore a green dress. Not the kind of dress you wear for your husband. The kind you wear when you want to remember what it feels like to be seen. He didn't notice. Didn't say I looked nice. Didn't look twice at all. He scrolled through his phone while we waited for the check. Told me about a coworker's boat. Asked if we were still low on eggs. I smiled. I nodded. I swallowed every scream inside me like it was part of the meal. And later in the driveway under the pale porch light, I stood there with my keys in hand and realized. He didn't forget the anniversary. He just forgot me. The next day I went to the storage closet and pulled out the box. The one with the letters. The sketch. The small silver chain Ethan gave me. Because it reminded him of how my laugh sounded. And at the very bottom, a folded note. Let me be the place you run to. Even if you never say it out loud. That afternoon, I drove to the hilltop behind the old art center. The place we'd once parked just to be together without walls. He was already there. Waiting in his car. I got in. And before either of us spoke, I leaned over and kissed him like it was the only thing keeping me from drowning. We didn't talk about Tom. We didn't talk about guilt. We just breathed each other in. And in his arms, in that car on that hill with the city far beneath us, I felt 17 again. Not because I was young, but because I was still capable of wanting. And maybe, just maybe, still capable of choosing. He waited until after. After the urgency had faded. After we lay tangled in his sheets in that small apartment he'd started renting across town. A place I pretended not to know the address of until I memorized it. Ethan's fingers traced slow, unhurried circles on my back. My body still humming, still greedy for his attention. My heart quieter now, unsure of where it belonged. That's when he said it. Softly. Carefully. Like he was holding a match near dry grass. Come with me. My breath caught. He didn't say it like a fantasy. He said it like a plan. I've been thinking about the coast, he continued. That little town you mentioned, where the cliffs catch fire at sunset. We could go. Start over. Just us. Just us. The words made my stomach flip. Not with excitement. With fear. I have a life, Ethan. I whispered, not daring to meet his eyes. A husband. A house. Children. Your daughters are grown, he said gently. And Tom. When was the last time he asked if you were happy? I flinched. Because I couldn't remember. And because Ethan was the only one who had asked. But still to leave? To unravel 30 years of shared history? To abandon the version of me that everyone knew? You want me to run away? I asked more bitterly than I meant to. No, he said. I want you to come home. To yourself. The room was quiet for a long time after that. And in that silence I realized something brutal. Ethan didn't just want my afternoons. He wanted my life. And part of me, a reckless aching part, wanted to give it to him. But another part, the loyal one, the scared one, the one still tethered to the dishes in the sink and the man I once loved, that part whispered, what if this is just a phase? What if you're mistaking freedom for love? I sat up slowly, pulled the sheet around me like armor. I can't decide this tonight. He nodded, didn't push. But when I kissed him goodbye, it tasted different. Like an ending trying to disguise itself as an option. And as I drove home in the dark, headlights dancing over pavement I knew too well, I realized the question wasn't can I leave? The real question was, what if I don't? It wasn't some dramatic discovery. No lipstick on a collar. No text left open on my phone. No whispered confession in the middle of the night. It was the simplest thing. A missed call. From Ethan. On the landline. Tom and I still had one. A relic from the days when the girls were young and cell phones felt unsafe. It rang rarely. Mostly telemarketers or my sister. That morning Tom answered it while I was folding laundry in the bedroom. I heard his voice through the wall. Hello. Then silence. Then again firmer. Who is this? And then the one word that made my stomach drop. Ethan. I stood frozen, socks limp in my hands. When Tom appeared in the doorway a minute later, the look on his face was unfamiliar. Not fury. Not confusion. Recognition. Not of Ethan. But of what I had been hiding. He held the phone like it burned his fingers. Who the hell is Ethan, Marianne? My mouth opened. Nothing came out. Because I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head. Always with me in control, choosing what to say, when to say it, how to soften the blow. But real life doesn't wait for confession. Drags it out of you by the roots. He's someone from high school, I said. My voice was too calm. Too practiced. Tom stepped closer. Someone who calls the house? While I'm right here. I didn't answer. Because lies are like cheap wallpaper. One tug and the whole thing peels off. You've been seeing him, he said. It wasn't a question. I looked down at the laundry. The same pair of jeans he's worn for 10 years. The sweatshirt I stitched when it tore. The ghost of a life we both stopped inhabiting long ago. I didn't plan it, I whispered. Tom's laugh was hollow. No one ever does. We didn't fight. That was the strangest part. We stood in the bedroom we'd shared for 3 decades, surrounded by tokens of a life we'd built, and we simply stared at each other. Not as husband and wife, but as two people who had outlasted the love that once bound them. Do you love him? He asked. And this time I didn't lie. I don't know, I said. But I know he sees me. And I stopped feeling seen here a long time ago. Tom didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just nodded. And walked out of the room. I sat on the edge of the bed for hours after that. Not because I didn't know what came next. But because I did. The secret was out now. And secrets once named become choices. The suitcase wasn't heavy. It should have been 30 years of marriage packed into one small roller bag. But most of what I left behind wasn't something I could fold. I stood at the edge of the living room, hands trembling around the handle. Tom sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. He didn't try to stop me. He just said, "You don't have to go." And I said, "But I do." Not out of anger. Not even because of Ethan. But because I had reached the edge of something. Not a marriage. But a version of myself. And I couldn't unknow what I had discovered. That I could still feel. Still want. Still begin. The girls didn't understand at first. They were angry. Confused. Hurt. "You're blowing everything up," my eldest said. "For what?" "A fling." I didn't blame her. because from the outside that's all it looked like. A mother having a midlife unraveling, trading stability for lust. But it wasn't about Ethan. Not completely. It was about the girl I used to be, the woman I never became, the years I spent shrinking so someone else could stretch. Ethan waited for me outside his apartment. Same grin, same softness in his eyes. He didn't speak when he saw me. He just opened the door and held out his hand, not to rescue me, not to rewrite everything, but to say, this next part, you get to choose it. We didn't run away. There was no dramatic move to the coast, no whirlwind elopement. Instead, we slowed down. We took walks, cooked dinner together, fell asleep tangled up like teenagers trying to memorize skin. And in the quiet, I learned something. Love doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with permission. To be soft, to be selfish, to become. It's been a year. Tom and I still speak. We share holidays. We're kind, because we were never cruel, just lost. And now I wake up in a small apartment with sunlit windows and peeling paint. I make my own coffee. I take my own breath. And sometimes when Ethan wraps his arms around me and murmurs, "You look 17 when you laugh like that," I smile. Because for the first time in decades I believe him. Not because I'm young, but because I finally feel alive.